While you are watching this video, the ground beneath Italy's third largest city is rising, not by centimeters, by meters. Houses are cracking, roads are deforming, and 500,000 residents of Naples wake up every single day not knowing whether today will be the day the supervolcano beneath them finally erupts. But this is not Yellowstone. This is not some distant threat hidden inside an American national park. This is Campi Flegrei, the supervolcano that sits literally inside the urban boundaries of a modern European metropolis. And at this exact moment in 2026, it is showing signs of activity that have not been seen in nearly 5 centuries. The name Campi Flegrei means Phlegraean Fields, or burning fields. The ancient Romans knew this place well. They built temples here. They believed that one of the entrances to the underworld was located in this region because the ground steamed, bubbled, and released sulfurous gases. They were not entirely wrong. They simply did not know they were living on top of one of the most explosive volcanic structures on the planet. Let me explain what a supervolcano really is, because the word is used so casually today that it has lost its true, terrifying meaning. A regular volcano, like Mount Vesuvius that destroyed Pompeii in 79 AD, ejects maybe a few cubic kilometers of material during an eruption. A supervolcano ejects hundreds, sometimes thousands of cubic kilometers. The difference is not one of degree. It is an entirely different category of geological event. Campi Flegrei last erupted 39,000 years ago in an event known as the Campanian ignimbrite eruption. That eruption expelled approximately 300 cubic kilometers of magma, rock, and ash. The explosion was so massive that its ash has been found in geological deposits as far away as Russia, more than 2,000 kilometers from Italy. Scientists believe this eruption may have contributed to a period of climatic cooling that affected early human populations across Europe. But here is what truly matters for us right now in 2026. Supervolcanoes do not give decades of advance warning. They can remain dormant for tens of thousands of years and then awaken within months or a few short years. And every geophysical indicator suggests that Campi Flegrei is emerging from its millennia-long sleep. The phenomenon happening right now is called Bradyseism. The word comes from the Greek brades, meaning slow, and seismos, meaning movement or tremor. Bradyseism is the slow but continuous uplift or subsidence of the Earth's surface caused by movements of magma, gases, and hydrothermal fluids deep within the crust. Naples and the region of Pozzuoli, which lies at the very center of the Campi Flegrei caldera, are experiencing positive Bradyseism. The ground is rising, and we are not talking about abstract geological numbers. Since 2005, the ground in some areas of Pozzuoli has risen by more than 1 meter and 20 centimeters. More recently, between 2022 and early 2026, the rate of uplift has accelerated dramatically. In certain areas, the ground is now rising 4 to 5 centimeters per month. Think about what that means in real terms. Imagine your home. Now imagine its foundation being slowly pushed upward, unevenly. One corner rises faster than the other. Walls begin to tilt. Cracks appear in ceilings, walls, and floors. Doors no longer close properly. Windows jam shut. And this is not hypothetical. It is happening right now to thousands of homes in Pozzuoli. Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, known as the INGV, has been monitoring Campi Flegrei with one of the densest instrument networks in the world. They operate seismic stations, tilt meters, GPS deformation sensors, gas monitors, thermal cameras, all collecting data continuously. And that data tells a troubling story. Seismic activity in the region has increased exponentially. In 2023, more than 3,000 earthquakes were recorded in the Campi Flegrei area. In 2024, that number surpassed 4,500, and in 2025, there were more than 6,000 seismic events. Most of these are small tremors, with magnitudes below 3.0, but their frequency and location are what truly matter. They are occurring in swarms, concentrated at depths between 2 and 3 kilometers, exactly where models suggest there is a large reservoir of pressurized magma and fluids. But here is the crucial detail that separates ordinary Bradyseism from catastrophic Bradyseism: the transition from elastic deformation to inelastic deformation, or fracturing. I'm going to explain this in a way you will never forget, because understanding this transition means understanding the real danger Naples is facing. When you stretch a rubber band, it deforms, it changes shape, but when you let go, it returns to normal. That is elastic deformation. Rock deep within the Earth's crust behaves in a similar way, up to a point. When magma rises, when gases accumulate, when pressure builds, the rock can deform elastically. It yields slightly, it stretches, it bends. And that is what causes the ground uplift we are observing. But every rock has an elastic limit, a point beyond which it cannot deform without breaking. And when rock breaks, you no longer have slow, gradual uplift. You get sudden fractures. You get significant earthquakes. And you potentially open pathways for magma and gases to escape rapidly toward the surface. Researchers at the INGV published studies in 2024 and 2025 analyzing the microseismicity of Campi Flegrei using advanced seismic tomography techniques. What they found is alarming. The seismic signatures of recent tremors are changing. Early earthquakes showed characteristics of pure shear rupture, the type of movement expected during elastic deformation. But more recent earthquakes show increasing components of tensional rupture and the formation of new fractures. In simple terms, the rock is no longer just deforming. It is beginning to break. And once fractures start propagating through the crust above the magma chamber, the situation becomes exponentially more dangerous. Here is the nightmare scenario. Campi Flegrei does not need a massive eruption like the Campanian Ignimbrite event 39,000 years ago to cause catastrophe. A phreatomagmatic eruption, which occurs when hot magma comes into contact with groundwater, would be enough to devastate the region. And Pozzuoli sits right by the sea, with extensive underground water systems throughout the area. A phreatomagmatic eruption is essentially an explosion of superheated steam mixed with rock fragments and magma. It can happen with very little warning, and it can eject material at supersonic speeds, creating shockwaves that demolish structures kilometers away. The last eruption of Campi Flegrei in 1538 was exactly this type. It formed an entirely new mountain, Monte Nuovo, in just 1 week. Fortunately, the area was sparsely populated at the time. Today, 500,000 people live directly within the danger zone. GPS deformation data is particularly revealing. It is not just the fact that the ground is rising, it is the pattern of that rise. Initially, between 2005 and 2020, uplift was relatively uniform across the entire caldera. But in recent years, a zone of maximum deformation has developed centered precisely beneath the port of Pozzuoli. This concentration of deformation suggests that the pressure source, whether magma or fluids, is becoming more focused, more shallow, and closer to the surface. Computational models developed by international teams of volcanologists attempt to answer the question everyone wants answered: how much time do we have? And the frustrating answer is that no one knows for certain. Supervolcanoes are notoriously difficult to predict because we do not have enough historical examples of their pre-eruptive behavior. Yellowstone has not erupted in 640,000 years. Toba, in Indonesia, has been quiet for 74,000 years. Campi Flegrei erupted just 500 years ago, but that was a relatively small event by supervolcano standards. What we have are models based on material physics, thermodynamics, and observations of smaller volcanoes. These models suggest that, given the current rate of pressure accumulation and deformation, Campi Flegrei could transition from its present state of unrest to an eruptive crisis anywhere between a few months and a few decades. That is not a particularly useful forecasting window if you are one of the 500,000 residents of Pozzuoli trying to decide whether to sell your home and leave. Italian authorities face an impossible dilemma. If they issue premature alerts and order evacuations that turn out to be unnecessary, they cause devastating economic panic and lose public credibility. But if they wait too long, hoping for absolutely unequivocal signs of imminent eruption, they may not have enough time to evacuate 500,000 people safely and in an orderly manner. There is a terrifying historical precedent for this dilemma. In 1980, volcanologists at Mount St. Helens in Washington state knew an eruption was likely, but they could not predict the exact moment. When the mountain finally exploded, the lateral blast devastated an area of 580 square kilometers and killed 57 people, including volcanologist David Johnston himself, who was monitoring the volcano. And Mount St. Helens is small compared to Campi Flegrei. Gas emissions are also increasing. Fumaroles across Pozzuoli are releasing growing quantities of carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and other volcanic gases. Some of these vents reach temperatures above 90 degrees Celsius. Residents report the smell of sulfur becoming increasingly frequent. Pets and wildlife are exhibiting strange behavior, avoiding certain areas, another indication that something fundamental is changing beneath the surface. Carbon dioxide is particularly dangerous because it is heavier than air. It accumulates in depressions, basements, and low-lying areas. In high concentrations, it can cause suffocation. Fatal incidents have already occurred in other Italian volcanic zones due to CO2 accumulation in enclosed spaces near emission sources. As Campi Flegrei increases its gas output, this risk becomes increasingly real for the local population. Structurally, Pozzuoli is becoming more fragile by the year. Historic buildings that have stood for centuries are developing serious structural cracks. The port, vital to the local economy, has required continuous repairs because piers and docks are deforming. Some roads have had to be completely rebuilt multiple times because uneven ground uplift renders them unusable. There is also the issue of underwater deformation. The floor of the Gulf of Pozzuoli is rising as well. Ships that once anchored in certain areas can no longer do so because water depth has decreased. And if you think about it logically, submarine uplift is even more concerning than uplift on land, because it indicates that the pressure source is broad enough to deform a massive area both on land and beneath the sea. Comparisons to Yellowstone are inevitable but misleading. Yellowstone is extensively monitored and shows occasional signs of unrest, but it is located in a relatively isolated area of Wyoming. If Yellowstone were to erupt, it would be a global catastrophe, no doubt, but at least there are not millions of people living directly on top of it. Campi Flegrei is embedded within dense urban fabric. Evacuation would be a logistical nightmare. Evacuation plans do exist. Italian civil protection has developed detailed scenarios that call for the evacuation of the entire high-risk zone in the event of an imminent crisis. But those plans depend on having enough time. They depend on clear precursor signals. And they depend on a population willing to obey evacuation orders, which historically does not always happen. During the Mount Vesuvius crisis in the 1980s, many residents refused to leave their homes despite official warnings. The economic dimension cannot be ignored either. Property values in Pozzuoli and surrounding areas affected by Bradyseism have collapsed. Who would buy a house that is literally cracking due to geological forces? Insurance companies are increasingly reluctant to offer coverage for properties in the risk zone. Businesses are closing. Young people are leaving. What remains is an aging, economically vulnerable population trapped in an area of growing danger. From a scientific perspective, Campi Flegrei has become one of the most intensively studied natural laboratories in the world. Researchers from dozens of countries converge on the region. New instruments are tested. New modeling techniques are developed. If there is any silver lining to this dangerous situation, it is that we are learning more about the behavior of supervolcanoes than ever before. But knowledge without the ability to act is deeply frustrating. Because at the end of the day, we cannot stop a volcano from erupting. We cannot slowly release the pressure. We cannot cool the magma. All we can do is observe, measure, model, and try to predict early enough to save lives. The central question of 2026 is whether the current episode of Bradyseism will continue indefinitely, eventually stabilize, or culminate in an eruption. Historical statistics offer limited help because every volcanic system is unique. Campi Flegrei has experienced multiple episodes of Bradyseism in the past that did not result in eruptions. Between 1969 and 1972, and again between 1982 and 1984, the ground rose dramatically. Earthquakes occurred, and then activity subsided without an eruption, but that does not mean this time will be the same. The total amount of uplift accumulated since 2005 already exceeds previous episodes. The current uplift rate is higher. Seismicity is more intense. All indicators suggest this episode is different, potentially more serious. So what happens next? In the short term, authorities will continue intensive monitoring. The local population will continue living with daily uncertainty. Tourists will continue visiting Naples, many of them completely unaware that they are just a few kilometers away from one of the most dangerous supervolcanoes on Earth. In the medium term, over the coming months and years, 3 scenarios are possible. First, activity gradually decreases, uplift slows, earthquakes become less frequent, and Campi Flegrei goes back to sleep for decades or centuries. Second, activity continues at its current level indefinitely, causing ongoing structural damage but no eruption. Third, activity accelerates, the rock fully fractures, and an eruption occurs. No one can tell you which of these scenarios will materialize. Not even the best volcanologists in the world. What they can tell you is that the third scenario is plausible, that current signals are concerning, and that Campi Flegrei deserves every bit of attention and resources it is receiving. For the residents of Pozzuoli and surrounding areas, life continues under a shadow of geological uncertainty. Children go to school, people go to work, families sit down for dinner together. But always with that awareness in the back of their minds that the ground beneath their feet is not stable, that it is moving, that it is being pushed by primordial forces that do not respect human borders, human economies, or human lives. And meanwhile, silently, centimeter by centimeter, month after month, the ground keeps rising.